Hello, everyone. I am Peter Freer. I am the founder and CEO of Play Attention. Welcome to Understanding and Harnessing Dopamine. And I really appreciate you being here. We'll have fun. We'll learn a little bit together. And in order to do so, one of the first things I like to do is ask you to be as little or as least distracted as you can be. So if you have your cell phone and you're watching me on your cell phone, would you turn off your messages coming in, or just so that we can focus and share this? I'd like to look at this like an interactive fireside chat that gives us the opportunity to learn together and to gain new information without being distracted. So, with that being said, if you are not viewing me on your cell phone, maybe you're on a tablet or a computer, would you turn your telephone off or just put it over to the side? That's part of what we'll gain from our understanding of harnessing dopamine today, by the way, how technology affects our brains and our dopamine system. This is being recorded, so we will have a recording for everyone probably tomorrow. It will be processed and ready by tomorrow. So if you're here and you're worried about missing something, you can always review the recording tomorrow. The agenda for today is who's in control anyway of regarding our dopamine system, differentiation and motivation and reward. So we want to make certain we know the differences between motivation and reward. We'll discuss that. We'll discuss dopamine deficiency in an ADHD brain, pain and pleasure balances, practical strategies to improve your life and your dopamine balance, and then a summary so that we can go over what we talked about and have a good closure so you understand and walk away with things that you can use. Who's in control? What is this dopamine system? What is dopamine all about? I really want to make this very, very simple for you. And I think when you understand, one of the reasons I'm doing this is so that if we understand the system that is in our brains and actively a major portion of our brain, perhaps we can come to an understanding of how to change it if it's problematic. So that is really what this is all about, so that we can understand the system. Who's in control of this system? What is it all about? Dopamine is what is termed the motivation molecule because it drives us to pursue goals and rewards. It is also a neurotransmitter. It is effectively synthesized right here, if you can see my cursor in the lower part of the brain, where tyrosine and L-DOPA are combined. So this is a very intricate system. It's a facility that actually produces dopamine. And it is a system so complex and intricate in the brain that it has its own delivery systems. If we've watched Amazon trucks deliver all those packages, think of that as one of the type of systems that's in the brain for dopamine. It has its own special delivery system to various regions in the brain. That's how important this is. So it's synthesized in the brain by an amino acid and L-DOPA, and then combined into dopamine, and then transported to various regions. Very complex system. Why the heck would we have something like that in the brain? Why is that necessary? We'll go into that in just a moment. So it is essentially a neurotransmitter. And for those of you who are not accustomed to the brain, I'm going to take it just a step deeper so we understand neurotransmitters. The brain is comprised of billions of nerve cells called neurons. And when we're looking at all of these neurons, they are contiguous. They're next to each other, but they're not continuous. They don't touch. In order to talk to each other, all the cells in our brain must communicate at one level or another. in order to function. So they form higher level networks, just about like your cell phone. If you looked at your cell phone as a brain cell, it is one cell among billions of cells on the planet. Now, your cell phone is rather a paperweight if it isn't connected to the other cells in the network. And so that's the way these cells operate in the brain. Is everybody kind of with me? I hope that's making sense. Your cell phone would be totally useless if you were not able to connect to other cells. That means you couldn't play your games on your phone. You couldn't call anyone. So this is the way the cells operate in the brain. Now, neurotransmitters, remember the cells are contiguous but not continuous. They don't touch. So there is a gap between them, and they have to, in order to excite or tell the cell next to them to do nothing, in other words, inhibit that cell from doing anything, they have to talk. And so they fire this little neurotransmitter between themselves. And that will either stimulate the cell next to it, excite it, or inhibit the cell from doing anything. So this is the way the brain works. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter. And it helps regulate, as you can see down here on the bottom of the screen, it helps regulate mood, attention, executive function, memory. It has a lot of different purposes. In our past, in an evolutionary sense, dopamine evolved, right, to form this very intricate system. It evolved, and there was a reason for it evolving. So the brain over time has a central purpose. One is for survival, primarily for survival, right? We have a whole fear mechanism in the brain so that when we were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger or a mastodon, we could run away. In this case, the dopamine system evolved because it would help us repeat behaviors that kept us alive as a species. Let's say that we're out hunting here because we need something to eat, and we bring home this deer. Now, the hunt gave us a burst of dopamine. It rewarded us, that we were rewarded internally when we were able to take down this deer. Now, that reward was rather an insurance policy that I would repeat that behavior in the future. And of course, that feeds my family. It feeds other people in our village. So this is an insurance policy to keep the species alive. Is everybody with me? I hope you're following. If not, use the chat and you may ask questions in there, and I will do my best to answer them at the end of the presentation today. So the insurance policy, dopamine serves as an insurance policy that we will be motivated to repeat behaviors that would help us survive as a species. Now, let's say that we hunted the deer, we got the deer, we got a burst of reward, that good feeling in the brain of dopamine. We have to take it home, we have to clean it. No tremendous reward for that, but then we tasted it and it was good. And that is another feature of dopamine, because remember I said dopamine is also responsible for memory and a little bit of learning. So it gave us a reward at that point when it tasted good, like, we'll need to hunt deer more often. So it's forming memories as well. Do you see a cycle here? I get rewarded for helping the species survive. That's the overall goal. I get that during the hunt. I get a rush from doing it. And that rush is still there for many folks here throughout the world, right? We have hunters here, and many of us can't understand why hunters hunt. We don't understand why they have a drive to do that. But it's a very primitive drive. It's been in the brain for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years evolving. And it gives them a certain rush. And then to eat it, be satisfied that they're providing food for their families, that gives them another rush. All of this is to ensure motivation that they will do it again. Everybody with me so far? Now, the dopamine system can be hijacked. This is very important to talk about right now, because we live in modern times where we don't really have to hunt, except maybe in the grocery store, we will hunt down an avocado or some hamburger or something like that. But it's not a hunt like before. So we have other things. We have an incredible ease at getting food, fast food that can be gained in a few minutes, right? We don't have to hunt for it. We just have to pull out our credit card. So it's a big change. So every substance we consume, whether it is food, wine, cigarettes, drugs, whatever, has an effect on the brain and the dopamine system. Every habit we have, it's gambling, video games, sex, it all has an effect on our brains. Now, I know this seems a little astray from ADHD and its dopamine system. We'll get to that. But you need to understand these basic mechanisms of how this evolved and how it worked. And those were our two first goals, to understand how this system, an intricate system, like the dopamine system and its delivery system, we understand that, and then we have to understand, how is the system hijacked anymore? What happens now, right? I think it's important now that we understand exactly what we're doing to ourselves with technology and with food and with drugs and video games and the rest of it. It's a fairly complex thing now, because we are not hunter-gatherers any longer. So if let's say that we're using alcohol, and you probably have seen this in your family somewhere or the other, they hijack the dopamine system, because when I have one glass of whiskey like this, it sends a rush of chemicals into the brain that flood that dopamine system and gives me more than I've ever had before. And when it floods that system, the system then notes that this is happening. We're getting a flood of input into the dopamine system. And so dopamine says, well, if you're getting that kind of flood, I don't need to produce that much anymore. I'll produce less, because you're getting an abundance of it. So it produces less. And even dopamine has little receptor sites on cells. So when the cell next to it produces dopamine and sends it over, they're like, well, I'm getting a flood, so I'm going to cut back my receptors, right? So I don't get flooded. I'll cut back the receptors. Your brain does that for you. And that leads to something called tolerance. And I'm certain you've heard of that before, tolerance, right? And I think that's critical, that we understand that we have a certain tolerance for drinking or smoking or drugs, those kinds of things. But there is a very fine line that we have to manage if we are participating in using alcohol or even food. For some of us, food is a drug, right? We can't get enough of it. Or perhaps it's video games as well. We can't get enough of it. Why is this? What happens? Well, it is related to tolerance. So I really want to get that out of the way as well, so we understand what tolerance is. So if it decreases the amount, right, flooding the system can cause that decrease. in dopamine receptors, and the brain says, I'm not producing as much. You're getting it on your own, and a lot of it. So that means that you would have to take more of the drug or the food or sexual relationships in order to get the rush that you had before. You'd have to have twice it the next time. Then you build a tolerance to that. And then you would have to have 3 times the next time. Do you see how this builds up in the brain? It's all a very natural process. And the brain has that process in it already on its own called the dopamine system, right? But we actually affect it with the way that we live in modern times. So since dopamine, and my last bullet point here is very salient, very important. Since dopamine affects motivation, what motivates me to do something, it also has an effect on memory and executive function, including executive function for those of you who are unaware of the nature of executive function. Executive function is like a suitcase into which we pour a bunch of different cognitive skills. Making good judgments, organizing, planning, decision-making, self-regulation, internal self-regulation, self-checking. All of those things are executive functions. They're a bunch of cognitive skills that are dumped into one suitcase, and the suitcase is called executive function. It means this big executive corporation in that suitcase, could be called that, basically runs these programs that make us function well. But dopamine affects motivation, memory, executive function, including decision-making and judgment. And these systems, if they are flooded, can become disrupted. All right. So if you know an alcoholic and they want to stop drinking, they know it's killing them. It's unfortunate. My stepfather was an alcoholic, and we would beg him to stop, beg him to slow down. And highly educated man, had a PhD, English professor, and he could not, his mind, his executive function was disrupted. He could not handle it. He could not manage his alcohol intake at all, to the point where he would go into comas over it. Now, a normal person wouldn't do that. But this shows you the level of disruption we can get by outside factors in our lives. In this case, his problem was alcohol. And it could be, a genetic predisposition for that. But the fact is that it is highly disrupting to this dopamine system, right? Could be cigarettes, could be alcohol, could be drugs. You probably know someone who falls into this pattern that I'm discussing now, right? Is everyone following? If you're following and understandable, could you just give me a quick hand up and let me know that this is making sense? And again, remember, there is a chat box here, so at any time, type a question, and I will try to address it at the very end, provided we have enough time to do all that. Perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Okay, good. So we need to know the difference between dopamine's role in motivation and reward, because I think there's a huge misunderstanding that's being propagated by TikTok, YouTube, and that kind of thing. Social media has made it seem like it's all about the reward, right? Dopamine's all about the reward, and that's just nonsense. We've got to make certain we are very clear on this, because there are a lot of folks who have no background in this. By the way, I've been studying since I invented Play Attention back in the late 1980s and finally brought it to market in 1994. So for over 30 years, I have been studying the human brain, human performance. I'm co-author of a paper with the United Nations on human performance in the nuclear power industry. So what I want to get to here is that you have folks who are touting things that are totally ridiculous in social media. And so you have to be very, very discriminating when to the sources you're listening to. And this is very, very important because I have heard so much nonsense about how it's all about the reward system, and it is not. So let's get to that. Remember I said, and if you can see my cursor here, dopamine is basically synthesized in the brain right here, but it has an intricate system of delivery throughout the brain. It's a highly, highly technical system in the brain. Now, why to get here? Why do we have that? Well, it was for survival initially. It was to reward behaviors to make us motivated to do them again. Is everybody with me? It would reward behaviors by giving us a good feeling that would motivate me to do them again. And that caused the survival of our species. Excuse me. So you have this reward system that gives us pleasure, but pleasure is only the intermediary. What it's supposed to do, what the primary important factor is that it motivates us to do it again. And again, that was related to survival of the species. So that's the pattern I wanted to show you here. It helps us overcome obstacles so that we could do it again. We got the reward, the motivator, basically the dopamine hit gives us a pleasurable feeling, but then that really motivates me to go out and hunt, right? No matter the hardness, the difficulty in the hunt or the weather, I'm ready to do it again so that I can get this reward and continue the species. It's that simple. It's not all about pleasure. That's ridiculous. Pleasure is just one little piece of this. It's about driving us to take action. And if you heard me before, why are we taking action? Why are we motivated? Can anyone say? What does this motivate us to do as a species? What was it intended to do? It's not just about feeling pleasure. It's about driving us to action. What action? It's about action that will continue the species. It will continue good behaviors that cause us to continue the species. Now, that's changed a lot in modern times, especially, yes, it was to survive. Someone mentioned it's to survive. It was. But now survival is much easier. But if we get the system hijacked, it can also be highly problematic. The rat study is a fantastic study. And this has been carried out, I don't know how many times for many years. So researchers taught rats in a cage how to press a food bar, right? Just this bar. If you pressed it, you got your reward. You got some really tasty food. Now the rats really learned to do that and they enjoyed it. As a matter of fact, they became a little chubby like this rat. And we're very happy about it. And then the researchers thought, what happens if we decrease the amount of dopamine in their brain significantly? So it is really important to understand that when they decrease the dopamine, the rats would rather lay around. They know they needed food. They still enjoyed food if you handed it to them. But what happened was they weren't motivated. They weren't motivated to go over and hit the food bar. Now, how strange is that? Somebody asked, it's not clear to me how what you're saying is different from what you're criticizing people say. Dopamine is a reward and pleasure. I get the ultimate purpose is to motivate the action, but is that a byproduct of reward? It's still retriggering reward and pleasure. Yes, but this pretty much makes clear the difference in that, Renee. This slide makes the difference, right? They can get reward and pleasure. They can. The food bar's right in front of them. But when your system gets hijacked, we don't get the motivation to do it. And we do this to ourselves all the time, right? I know what I should be doing, but I don't have the motivation to do it. And this is a modern problem. If you have clients, a child, or yourself, you're probably very aware of this, that you know what you should be doing, but you're just not motivated to do it. How many people here recognize that? That there are things that I should really be doing, and I know I should be doing. I just have no motivation to do it. So this is exactly the difference. We're talking about differentiation, and this is the difference. It's not just about pleasure and reward. Those are two minor elements. It is made, the pleasure and reward is given to us in the brain so that we're likely to repeat behaviors that keep us healthy, keep us alive longer, help the species survive. All right, is this making sense now? That's the difference. So it's not just this pleasure reward nonsense. And then people often go, well, I don't know why I'm not motivated to do anything. And they live a lifestyle that actually promotes that. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail just shortly. As a matter of fact, by the way, go back to that slide. Those mice, some of the rats were so unmotivated, they starved themselves to death. They knew they needed to eat. I'm not going to press the space bar. I just don't have it in me to press it. So some of the rats would actually starve themselves to death rather than just go over and press the space bar. All right, then if you understand this little connection that we have now, you're understanding more of about how the system works. So let's understand it in the context of ADHD. This is rather interesting. Research has found that individuals with ADHD often have lower levels of dopamine. Both of these now are very important. Remember, I said there's that transporter system. So in this case, they have fewer Amazon trucks on the road to deliver their dopamine, right? And they have fewer receptors, right? Fewer houses that they would deliver it to. I hope that makes sense in kind of using that as a metaphor. And these are associated with key areas of the brain associated with executive function, attention and motivation, essentially, that come under executive function. So is this a problem of antecedents? You know, is it because they have ADHD that this happens? Or is it due to the fact that they have low dopamine that causes the problems to be exacerbated in ADHD? And I'm not certain that's entirely clear, but we do know that typically low dopamine levels, especially because of transporters and receptors, are involved in ADHD. Now, this, I think, understanding this also gives us a roadway, a path to follow to actually change our lives. Because, you know, when you get a teacher that doesn't understand this, and you get a note home as a parent that says, you know, Beth is a really sweet girl, but she is so lazy and unmotivated. How many people here have experienced that with a child, a client, a spouse, a significant other, a relative? Wow, that's a lot of us here. Yeah, absolutely. This is something that's rather phenomenal with and it's ADHD. That means the reward system isn't quite as responsive. So if it's not responsive, and this is very important because I'm going to make a jump here from something I said previously into what this slide is saying. The slide is saying that low dopamine levels mean that the brain's reward system isn't as responsive. Now, we saw this happen when I talked about alcohol, drugs, and addiction. What do we do then to increase that reward because we like that reward. I mean, that's what it's all intended for, right? So what happens? Does anyone know? If this is low, and we found that that happens when the system is hijacked, then what does that person have to do to get that rush? Right. Exactly. A lot of people are saying this now. Well, in order to get that rush, they've got to take more or they'll self-medicate. Perfect. Now you're with me. They'll self-medicate. How many people have seen that in people you've known with ADHD? They do it on their own. They self-medicate. That's a lot of us here. How many people of you have seen things that are very addictive tendencies? Like they will sit and binge on video games for hours and hours and hours. Ask them to clean up the room, can't do it. Not motivated. Get them to sit in front of a video game and binge on it for hours and hour and an hour. Is that you? A couple of people said, that's me. All right. Is that you? Is it your child? Have you seen it? Do you understand now how this is all happening? It is an amazing thing. It really is. But now that you kind of understand how this is happening, we have to also understand it's not an excuse to fail. You can't, well, you may sit home, not get out of your pajamas, and you don't really even want to get out of bed. But it isn't an excuse to fail because, you know, someone just mentioned it here, and it was really actually a very good question in the question site. It says, hey, can we hijack it back? That's the significant question. That's the right question to ask. If we get hijacked by doing certain things, can we hijack it back? I live in a house of 3 out of 5 diagnosed with ADHD, including myself. The other 2 display some symptoms. No motivation leads to bad moods. And that's true. So can we hijack it back? That's the question. And that's what this slide is saying. Dopamine is not an excuse, and you should never use it as an excuse to fail, because then you are stuck in a rut for the rest of your life. But if you understand that the brain is neuroplastic, that means it's moldable, and it is a fantastic organ. This little 2 or 3 pound organ in your head responds to what you feed it, what you nurture it, what you let it see, smell, taste, sense, right? All of that changes the way the brain wires itself. So absolutely, we can hijack it back. It is not an excuse to fail. So this is to embrace, talks about embracing a very powerful mindset. Dopamine is a tool I can use. If I'm going to hack it back, I can do it. It's a tool. It's not a limitation. Now, many people say, I can't, you know, I actually, my staff and I have meetings weekly, and the people that call us and say, well, I have low dopamine, there's nothing I can do. And you're like, no, there is something you can do. They don't want to hear it, but there are things you can do. I'll go into those in greater detail so that we do have a clear path. But it is not an excuse to fail. You are not stuck here. Remember, I started out with who's in control here? We're in control here, right? We can control this. We can change our lives. This is actually very, very important. You must accept personal responsibility and proactive management for yourself, if you're here for yourself, for your children, if you have a child with this difficulty, or for your clients, you can help them gain personal control over this. Let's talk about this pain-pleasure balance. And I want to go into this in a little detail because everyone here is like, well, I'm sure it is a pleasure reward system. But right now, it is, for the majority of us, it is so out of balance. Because We don't have to hunt for food any longer. We want food, we can get it in a few minutes at a drive-through window. We don't have to do anything to have great pleasure in our own homes. Well, probably, how many people here have a video game console in their home? Yeah, again, vast majority of us. How many people here have entertainment systems in their home? Even the poorest of us here in the United States will have a big flat screen TV in their home. So we have all of this input. And how many people here own a cell phone? Yeah. Instant gratification at my fingertips. So we constantly are slammed with things that try to dominate or hijack our dopamine system. And I'm not talking just about video games. I'm also referring to TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and I hope you realize that they have scientists on their staff who figure out how to keep you occupied, how to keep you and your dopamine system on their site as long as they can. How many people knew that they do that? A few of us here know. They have people who write code to make certain that you're going to stay there as long as they can keep you. And why is that? Well, the longer you stay, the more advertisements they move, the more money is made. And we're talking about billions and billions of dollars. So if you are using that for many hours during the day, any of those things that I just talked about, you have to hijack that system and take back your personal, empower yourself to take back control of your own brain. Because overindulgence in pleasure can diminish motivation. If I am overindulging in food, sex, drugs, alcohol, remember what it does in the brain. If it floods the brain in this pleasure reward system, then the brain will cut back because you're getting enough on your own. And so it cuts back the pleasure reward system. And that means for you, though, you have to double the amount and triple the amount and quadruple the amount because of tolerance. So it is a huge problem, but nothing that we can't hijack back, right? It hijacked us, we can hijack it back. So how do we do that? And that's this whole section is devoted to talking about how we will hijack it back. One of the practical strategies to balance this pain and pleasure, our dopamine system, is just engage in activities that require effort. Remember, this came from hunter-gatherers so that we could survive as a species. So we don't have to go out and hunt for our deer. We don't have to go out and hunt for a hamburger, or we don't have to pick a crop so that we have a nice salad tonight. So how do we substitute for that? It's easy when all you have to do is pick up a weight, go for a walk, play some pickleball, tennis, martial arts, anything that gives you a little bit of exercise starts to hijack your brain back. That's the very beginning of this, because we're talking about balance here. We're talking about a careful balance. And when you hijack it back, what happens once you're balanced out? What happens to your motivation? I want you to answer that. When you balance it back, what happens to your lack of motivation? Can anyone answer? That's right. When we hack it back, hijack it back, we are able to stay motivated. we're able to do these things that we know we should be doing, but we don't do them. So the first thing is to start getting a little self-regulation on your own. And this is hard, right? Because if you're unmotivated right now, if you are unmotivated, then you have a hard time getting even started on even a small habit, like going for a walk, walking your dog, going out and having a little game of badminton in the backyard. You know, these are all very easy for you to do, but you have to get enough motivation just one time. But there are secret ways to actually do that, which will not require a lot of motivation to do it. And I'll talk about that, right? And for an individual, an ADHD individual, you need to engage in activities that promote neuroplasticity, right? That improve dopamine function over time. This is what I did in Play Attention. We give people the power in Play Attention to wear a simple armband, something like this, right? You put this armband on, and it allows you to control the computer by your brain alone, right? This is empowering because now that thing that's been hijacked is back in my control. I can move things around by my mind. My mind's not controlling me. My mind's not telling me I'm unmotivated or lazy. I'm not having any of that language. I'm actually controlling the computer by my mind. I get to see what's happening in real time. Does everyone realize how significant that is when you gain control over your own brain? That is true empowerment. That is what I invented Play Attention to do. Now, specific techniques for regulating dopamine levels. Let's see. This is the fun part. How many people here recognize this woman? I know this is old for some of us. Keep coming. Yeah. All right. Wow. Okay. Many of us here remember her. Famous French cook. Does anyone remember her name? She specialized in French food. Anyone? Just go ahead and type it in if you remember who she is or was. And what she said all the time, and she ate her own cooking and lived to be a ripe old age. But she always would say, everything in moderation. Remember, everything in moderation. Let me see if I got any responses. So anyone who knows who this person was. Yes. Oh, wow. Okay, great. We got a lot of people that said, that's Julia Child. Yes. Excellent. Oh, Bruce knows. Yeah. Pepin's mentor. It's Julia Child. Everything in moderation. That is the one greatest thing. Remember, she created, and she's basting her turkey here. You know, she was one of the persons you'd see on PBS or, a cooking show, and she would be showing you how to make your Thanksgiving turkey. But everything in moderation was her favorite saying. So when you're doing this, and we're saying about practical strategies to employ here, you don't have to eat the elephant all at once. You're going to take small nibbles. So when you're setting small achievable goals, this makes your life so much easier, and it's easier to get motivated because now you know, let me preface this by saying, many times when you're unmotivated, you will develop this list in your head of reasons that you can't do this task that you should be doing. Taking a walk, walking the dog, cleaning your room, something involving motion and movement and exercise a little bit. But how many people here can identify with the fact that all of a sudden that language pops in your head? Oh, no, I can't do that. No, that's way too much for me. Not going to be able to do it. Right. But remember, every journey begins with a single step. So what if we just made some very small steps? Yeah, I think I can do. I'll do that for 1 minute. For today, it's 1 minute. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for 1 minute. I can accomplish that. I'm going to go outside. I'll set my watch and I'll walk around for 5 minutes or 1 minute. Let's say 1 minute today. 5 minutes was way too much. 1 minute. So I go out for 1 minute. Yeah, my goal tomorrow, let's do 2 minutes. Let's do 2 minutes tomorrow. Because I can break it down into small, winnable goals. Now, when they are achievable, what happens to me at that point? If I said, I'm going out for 1 minute, I'm going to do the walk. What happens when I do achieve that? I go out and I take my 1 minute walk and I come in feeling better. What did I just achieve? I just got a little bit of a reward, didn't I? Yeah, it is so motivating. And that reward tells me, I should do this again tomorrow. No, maybe not tomorrow. I'll do it day after tomorrow, right? We always have that language popping into our head. But by just the fact that we're setting these really achievable goals, we can actually do it. We can take it a little bit at a time. Effort-based, yeah, I like that. Mindy says, that's effort-based dopamine. That's right. And you get that rush. All right. So Renee said, what do you do when the starting costs feel like more effort than they are worth? When, if you always think negatively, Renee, you will never go anywhere. You actually have to have a vision, set a vision for yourself. You will be able to do it. And I will be able to do it for 1 minute. And if you can't do it for 1 minute, Renee, do it for 30 seconds. If you can't do it for 30 seconds, do it for 20 seconds. You have a starting place that you can achieve. You are absolutely not totally unable to do this. Start small, continue. It's up to you. And it is not a matter of self-talk. Start, set a goal, and do it. It's that simple. Here's an activity that you can do, developing a personal plan to harness dopamine effectively. Take just a few minutes to write down your goals and the steps you need to achieve them, just like I just talked about in a walk, just going outside. Break them into smaller, manageable tasks and set deadlines. You see that? Set deadlines, super important. Make certain you set a deadline. Are really, really good. So this deadline sets a timeline for you to do this. And you want to make it reachable, right? And at 4:30 today, Eastern, I'm going to go take a walk for 30 seconds. But it'll be my first walk. I'll take a walk for 30 seconds. I can do that. I said it. Remember, the word is achievable. Small, manageable, achievable tasks for me. And then you figure out, oh man, this feels so good. You begin a regular exercise routine. And you call your friend and go, I have experienced something so cool. I feel so good about this. I want to share it with you. And when you talk like that on the phone to your friend, what happens? You get, that's right. I get a reward. I get a reward. Is everybody with me? And when I get that reward, I'm now sharing it. And she gets a reward. So we kind of have this mutual thing going on of our brain syncing, and we are both in that position where we are getting a small, manageable reward. And this is life-changing. As much as I'm making it very simple and fun and easy to understand, it is profoundly life-changing. Do it. You can practice mindfulness, getting control over your brain again, relaxing, being in the moment, right? This is super, super important. And that we have the ability to control and regulate it, but we have to take small steps to doing it. So maybe I practice being mindful for 20 seconds. I come back and I set that deadline and say right before bed too. I think I'm going to try 30 seconds to a minute to be mindful before I go to sleep. These small steps are just the start to a wonderful journey for for you to regain control. This is exactly why I developed Play Attention way back in the early 90s, so that we could develop these, could develop my self-regulation skills. Now, what is self-regulation? Self-regulation means that I'm able to have an internal control center where I'm not impulsive. Is everyone clear? Impulsivity and lack of self-regulation, a lack of emotional regulation. Self-regulation just means I'm not going to be impulsive. How many people here, if you're ADHD yourself, have gotten yourself into hot water because you've been very impulsive? Yeah, that's self-regulation. That is part of executive function. So if this is true, then isn't it time you hijack your system back? It's all about, and get rewarded for hijacking it back. Remember, there is reward in hijacking this back. I hope everybody understands the connection now. I mean, that was really our primary goal today. When you're, in this kind of summarizes this whole section, techniques for self-regulation and building internal motivation. Like I said, establish a routine. But remember, don't set up this huge routine that sounds really good at the time you develop it. And then you go, I'll never do that. I'll never get to do that, right? You're not motivated to do it. How do we get there? We set clear, achievable goals, small pieces. You break it down into small pieces. Because once you do that, you begin this whole life change. And then that life change gives you, when you do it, you accomplish even that small goal, it sets the chain back. And the chain is not you getting hijacked by all of these outside factors. It's you getting back to running your own life, running your brain, running your dopamine. I hope this is making sense. And you get to use that reward, right? This is the fact that you can reward yourself in completing the tasks and create positive associations. I hope you're with me. And there are a bunch of people that have asked, can I get this later? And absolutely you can. We're recording this, so you'll be issued a copy of this or link to it so that you can have it. Probably it'll go out tomorrow, I would suspect. So this, again, was why I created Play Attention, so that you could absolutely hijack your brain back, controlling the games, all that rewire your dopamine system through executive function, learning to self-regulate, learning emotional control, learning to pay attention and sustain it when you need to, learning to be mindful, right? Learning to finish tasks. All of these are in Play Attention. This is exactly why. This is why I love talking about dopamine and how this regulation system actually works and what the most important feature of the dopamine system is. And if we can grasp that, we can hijack it back and take control of our lives again. Because with Play Attention, sparking those new neural pathways to reset our lives. We use small achievable goals that are set for you in the program so that each time you do just this little bit better, nobody's going to allow you to fail. It improves your self-regulation, emotional control, self-control, cognitive control, executive function. That's all in there. This is really important for you to walk away with anything. Managing ADHD and your dopamine system, the two are connected highly, right? We've learned that today. It's more than just coping with your symptoms. It's about empowerment. Hijack it back. You've got the tools. We've got the tools. I gave you some tools today so that you can improve your life. You have the power to make those changes. You can do that. Next steps for you. Number one, you can take our online test at playattention.com so that you can figure out what cognitive areas you really need to improve. What are your weaknesses and what are your strengths? Take the ADHD test on our site. It will tell you what you need work in, need help with, and what we can help you with. Then you can have a one-to-one consultation with someone who can guide you again. If you'd like to, please do. Playattention.com. Our next Play Attention webinar is on the site. You can actually sign up for it and come to that too. It is very informative, so you can actually see how you can take control. I love that. Hijack your life back. I think that's just a wonderful way to put it into perspective here. Now let's get it at the end here. We're just going to summarize. So we have these a summary basically tells us what we can walk home with today. So we understand the dopamine system now, right? It's crucial because it influences how motivated we feel and how well we can focus. So remember, it's not about the reward pleasure. That whole thing was placed in line so we would be motivated to do it again, motivated to do a behavior that would help us survive as a species, right? We need to make certain we take that back. So we are now motivated to feel that we can control our own lives, our own destinies. It's not about the reward. It's part of it, but it's not the critical part is understanding that it is motivation related. Many people think that dopamine is all about pleasure we get from rewards, but it's actually more about the motivation to seek out those rewards. It's what makes us want to get up and do things. These are the summary that you should walk away with, right? Individuals with ADHD often have lower levels of dopamine transporters, right? We said in the ADHD brain, typically they're finding low dopamine production, low dopamine transporter system, and fewer receptors in areas of the brain that are associated with executive function, attention, motivation. We also learned today that overindulgence in pleasure has a tendency to diminish our motivation, and many of us here already know that. You didn't want to hear it maybe today, but you are hearing it, and you know this is true. You probably already knew it. We overindulge and then our motivation goes down, and but today you have been empowered because you now know the system. You now can hijack the system back. All right. And can one of my staff put the Play Attention system in the website on, because a bunch of people in chat are asking for the website. Can someone type it in for me? It is www.playattention.com. And I think someone should be able, from my staff, I think I have a couple of people here on staff that can type it in. Okay, one of the folks said, I'm going to have to do it. Okay, because I am the host. So www.playattention.com. All right, and that goes to hosts and panelists. Can everyone see that? So, because a bunch of people have asked me. Great. Okay, super. The last takeaway you have here is that you have practical strategies now, like Play Attention, mindful breathing exercises, physical exercises, breaking things into doable pieces that significantly help you regulate your dopamine levels. All right, and let's make certain, I want to make certain everyone got that to everyone. Okay, I'm going to put that in again because only a few of us can see it. Now it's going to everyone, www.playattention.com. Now, tell me if you see that, everyone that's here. Perfect. Okay, thank you. All right. I really appreciate your time. I hope you learned something. I had a blast. It's always good to talk like this. And let me see if there are any other questions. If you have any other, type them in now as we're going to wrap up. When I do sign off, I will leave the chat box up. So if you have further questions, if you want to sign up for a consultation, you can just put in consultation. That's not a problem. Ask them. Okay, so yeah, you remember you can. I'm going to take the slides back just one here. You can take the online test at playattention.com. You can schedule a consultation. You come to the next Play Attention webinar. You can type if you want to take the test. They'll send you a link for it. Just type in the word test. If you want to consult, type in the word consult. They'll set up a consult with you via email, and they'll send you a link. If you want, say, webinar, they'll send you a link for the webinar. So next step, slide, ask them to type test if you want it. That's what my staff is typing me. If you want a consultation, type in consultation, and we should be good to go. Now, I'm going to try to jump to a few questions here. Let's see what we can do. Thank you for everyone for all those compliments. That's giving me a reward, isn't it? When you compliment someone, so that I might do this again. Leslie asked, what about the lack of motivation with a person with ADHD? How can they be helped? I hope, Leslie, if you're still here, I hope you understand how you absolutely can help yourself now to pick back up, hijack your brain back. Reba asked, how can TBI affect the dopamine system? Traumatic brain injury can adversely affect your dopamine system, but it's all dependent on what type of traumatic brain injury that you have. You should talk about that. You probably have a psychologist or therapist you're working with. You should talk about that with them because it can really affect you. And you probably already know that. That's why you asked. But the strategies I gave today would work the same for you as everyone else. So please try them as well. Play Attention could also do well. We've worked with many, many people with TBI. All right, let me see what else I'm missing here. William asked, is the problem too much or too little dopamine when we are unmotivated? When we are unmotivated, it's just that the system is out of balance. You have given yourself overindulged and the system has cut itself back. And so when we have, it's not a problem of too much or too little. You've basically kind of disrupted a system. So the takeaway here today was gain back control of your system. And I gave you the ways to do that. Remember, if you haven't remembered them, you can always watch this video next time. People have said, well, I know I should be doing things. I think I can now finally get to them. Absolutely. All right. Oh, this is a good question. Lori said, how do we make this clear or teach my 14-year-old son that is also 2E and has slow processing disorder? And that I feel he's addicted to any type of technology. He can't handle it. Yeah, this is tough, Lori, and I'm not going to say it's easy because when they are addicted, they will fight you tooth and nail telling you, I am not addicted. I am not. I have full control over it. It's kind of like talking to a junkie. You know, you say, or an alcoholic. When I used to talk to my Stefan, I said, you need to slow down. Let's go to the hospital. Let's get dried out. I have full control over all of this. I am not addicted. And it was just almost, for an adult, trying to reach an adult was almost impossible. For the 14-year-old, it will be uncomfortable for you, but you'll have to set up parameters. And it is uncomfortable because they will make your life a living hell for a little while, but it is uncomfortable. But you have to set those parameters now, because if you don't take control of it now, and you should talk to this if you have a therapist for your child or a counselor, to learn these strategies so that you can implement them a little at a time. You have to do it now, because if he gets older and this is going on, you know it's going to be even worse. So I feel for you. I do. I've seen this many times. Get a support network around you and start to do it now. And I love your concern, because it is important that you make the changes now. David said, can we hijack it back? And the answer to that was definitely. Sharon asked, is there a difference between activities which do provide more intense pleasure on a basic level, food, etc., and less interesting or pleasurable activities, mundane tasks, which are hard for ADHD people to get done? It is. There is a difference between those activities. For instance, when you watch an ADHD child play a video game that they love, easy, huge dopamine rush. Then they're trying to do homework, not a huge dopamine rush. So if you break it down into a very doable piece, instead of if it's a half-hour math assignment, let's sort out, let's just cover up this much of the page, and we're only going to do these 5 minutes worth. Don't worry about the rest of that stuff. Let's do it in 5 minutes, and we'll get a break. And when they accomplish that, that's a bit of a rush. They get a small break. I say, well, let's do another 5 minutes or less, easy to use chunks. So you start hijacking it back. Good question, too. That was a very good question. I'm autistic, Lynn says. With ADHD, I don't have a lack of motivation. Personal, it's about overcoming the uncomfortable feeling of overwhelmed, right? It's Lori or Lynn, excuse me, if you're still here, is it inertia? Is that the inertia is so hard, you can't get yourself up and running, right? You feel uncomfortable and trying to overcome that feeling. So if that is so, again, that inertia is what's really difficult. And again, what people have done to get out of that is that you've got to take a small step, just one small step in the right direction, and then repeat the next day. Small steps. You've got to get that motor running. All right. I think, David said, well, it's hard to help your kids with ADHD when you have it too. And you are spot on, David, absolutely spot on. But know that it can be done, and you're modeling for them. Start it yourself. Model it for them. Show them and talk to them about hijacking it back. I love it. Brilliant, though. Again, significant questions here. All right. I think I've got it. Yeah, I pretty much have it, I think. All right. I think I have almost all of them. Access in the future. Yes, we have access. We're going to send you the video. All right. I think we've got them all. That's all that my staff is sending me for the time being now. I can't read the first name, but I'm completely addicted to social media and YouTube, including positive stimuli and binge watching. Just time and place. Absolutely. You and the majority of the people here, I would bet. Stop. Lower your screen time. And it could be a minute today, 5 minutes tomorrow, a little at a time. Substitute it for something you love to do, like taking your dog for a walk, making something in the kitchen, playing a game of pickleball, whatever it is that really gets you going. But do less screen time. Little pieces, little steps. Okay. I'm way over, and I know my staff hates it. Thank you so much for all your time. And if there's anything else, please let us know. Shirley said, how about hyper-focusing and priorities? That's the last one that's floating in here. List out your priorities, Shirley. Set them into, what are real priorities to you in the hierarchy. Little steps to get there. Don't have to swallow them all at one time. Just pick one at a time. Make a plan to achieve it. The hyper-focusing, we could help you out with in play attention. We specialize that in play attention so that you can learn to sustain and direct attention without tuning out your whole family. So that's super important. You should get a consultation and talk about how you can do that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if there's anything else we can do, please let us know. Just send us an email. We'd be happy to do it. And it's been exciting and a lot of fun in discussing this with you. I'll do it again. I got a great reward out of this, right? Thank you so much. Take care.